Well, when you were children and you were playing on a playground and you came a conflict, how did you solve it? Probably with a fight, arguments, but when it comes to countries, usually ends up in war. And when it's over with, on a playground, it's a bloody nose, skinned knee, some hurt feelings, maybe a black eye. But when it comes to the world stage, it's a lot more serious. You have lifelong injuries. You've got loss of property. You have loss of death. Less than 2 months ago, Ukraine looked very beautiful. People lived in peace. Things are wonderful. How many of you have been to Ukraine? Okay, a number of you here. I was there a few years ago. Beautiful, wonderful people. Enjoyed being there, enjoyed visiting, staying with people. Life was good. And in Ukraine, you've got a lot of productive farmland. You also have a lot of nice cities. And at that time, they had electricity, they had water, they have food. Life was good, especially on the farm. Families were living happily and peacefully. Things really looked good. Every day the sun would rise and people would get up and go to work or go around their business. Things were really good. And children were allowed to be children and they could play and enjoy each other, and they did it in safety and happiness. Life was peaceful, life was happy, life was good in Ukraine at that time. Turn the clock back about to 1939, and you could say the same thing about Poland. A lot of beautiful cities. It was the gem of Europe. It was probably the most advanced, or one of the most advanced countries in Europe. It too had lots of beautiful farmland, beautiful landscape, natural resources. To us, it was more than that. It was our home. That's where we lived. My father was a pastor of the Adventist church in Warsaw, Poland, capital city of Poland. I had a sister, 6 years old. My brother was 3 years old at the time. I was still in the oven, almost ready to join the family. And we lived there in Warsaw, a beautiful city. In September of 1939, Mother took my brother and my sister to visit her mother, my grandmother. They went to Poland, but the eastern part of Poland. And while she was there, things were good. She was able to take the trip. My father stayed back in Warsaw and did his pastoral duties there. However, during that time, evil minds were already at work. Stalin and Hitler got together and they decided that on a certain day in September, they're going to invade Poland. Russia invading from the east, Germany invading from the west, and take over and divide Poland amongst themselves. And here it happened. Hitler opens war on Poland. Those were the headlines one particular day. It happened on the 17th of September, 1939. Poland was invaded from both sides. Poland was now an occupied country. Hundreds of tanks rolled into Poland. And at this particular time, Poland was not prepared for anything of this type, and so it was really quite easy to take over Poland. And so Russia had the eastern part of Poland, Germany had the western part of Poland. Well, I'll back up. No, this is the slide I want. You see the red dotted line there? That's where the division was. That's all of Poland. And where that red line goes If you look on the left side of the red line, you see Warsaw. That's where my father was, that's where our home was. If you look on the right side of the red line, still Poland, however, that part was now in the hands of Russia. And that happened to be the site where my grandmother lived. And that happened to be where my mother was visiting and where my brother and my sister were. Well, this presented quite a problem because you can't just cross from one side to the other like you used to be able to do when it was one country. And so my mother had to figure out, how am I going to get from one side to the other? So she took whatever means she could, took the train for part of the way, and then had to walk through the woods, getting closer and closer to the border. Now, this is not a picture of my mother, nor is it my brother George or my sister Hannah, and that's not me in the arms. I was there, but not externally. And so she walked a long ways, and eventually she got to where she could see the guards and the border. There was a problem there because it was well guarded. And so she was waiting for an opportunity when she could dash across the border with my brother and sister without getting caught. The soldier would march up one direction, turn around and march the other direction, and she watched for a spot when he would turn his back. She thought she could get across to the other side. Well, she tried, but he stopped. Halt! You can't go there. You have to stay on this side. She pleaded with him, but my home, my husband, Warsaw, we live over there. We're just visiting. No, can't let you go. And so she began to pray that God would touch the heart of this soldier. And God did. Eventually the soldier said, I can't let you cross, but I can't stop what I don't see. And he turned his back, and at that time she was able to cross over, and eventually she was able to make it back to Warsaw and join her husband at our home. Well, a lot of people think that Hitler's main thing was to exterminate the Jews, to get rid of the Jews, but his ambitions went far, far beyond that. And what he wanted to do is to rule the whole world, but starting out in a smaller way. This is a direct quote from Hitler. You can see what he wanted to do. His plan was to murder every Polish-born man, woman, and child. Every, not just the Jews, but every one of them. He wanted to totally depopulate Poland, and he wanted what was Poland to be Germany, and for Germans to move into that section, into that area. That was his goal. And you can see here again, posting, it happens to be the same jacket I wore today, but we were in Auschwitz when I took these pictures. It says Poland was to be canceled, and Germany would double in size. Well, war is a terrible thing, and this is what was happening in Poland and to the Polish people, as you can see in this picture. This is not a lot different from what you see today as you watch the news, is it? It's kind of like watching a bad movie, a rerun of a bad movie, seeing it all over again. I don't know if my mother was talking about her or somebody that she saw, but I remember her talking about somebody peeling a boiled egg. And you know how some of the egg sticks to the shell? The person, or maybe it was my mother, took the thumb and scraped out a little bit just to have a little bit of food there. Also, where somebody threw away potato peelings. And those potato peelings she took, or somebody, and boiled them and made peeled potato soup. Things were tough, and they weren't getting any better. When it was all over, 85% of Warsaw was destroyed. Many people fled from Warsaw. Those that didn't, 150 to 200,000 of them were killed, died in there. This was our hometown. The Nazis would set fire to their apartment buildings and to the houses, and then they would watch as the residents of that apartment building would jump, trying to get into safety. They would shoot them on their way down. It was just unbelievable, the cruelty that went on. During this time, my father was eventually taken into the Polish army. And while in the army, he was captured at some point, and he spent the rest of the wartime in a prison camp. We didn't know if he was alive, he was dead, where he was, what was happening. And Mother was there with the three of us, with 3 children. Before things got this bad, where 85% was destroyed, my mother decided she would better get out of Warsaw and go where it would be a little safer. Well, where do you think you'd go? She was half German. That was a real help, and she knew the German language just as well as she knew Polish. And before things got this bad, she took the 3 of us, and she fled Warsaw, and she headed for Germany. Now, I remember riding in boxcars. I remember riding in backs of trucks. As a little child, I didn't know exactly what was going on. But anyway, we eventually, meanwhile, I should tell you what was happening with the Jews. Meanwhile, in Auschwitz, Hitler was operating the death camps. And so many went through there, mostly Jews, but not just Jews. And I don't know if you can read the German part, but what it means there is that work will set you free. What they were told is, pack up your most valuable belongings. Take them with you. We're going to take you to a place where we have work for you. Well, that wasn't quite true. They took their belongings and then they had to leave them there. That way Hitler wouldn't have to go through all the apartments looking for the most valuable stuff. The people got them themselves. And so they were taken to the death camps. And for most of them went directly to the gas chambers. They were told after the long trip, a good shower would feel good. So they went into the large, it's kind of like barracks, big brick buildings, like a big gym, high ceiling. They put them in there. They told them, okay, take off your clothes, put them, and you could see the piles of shoes they had and the piles of glasses and all the things they have on display there at Auschwitz. But then there are little hatches up in the ceiling, and they would drop poison through those little hatches, and the people, instead of getting a shower, were poisoned, died right there, then they were burned. Those that were fit enough to work, which is about 25% of them, were put to work doing various things. And altogether, about 6 million people of Poland died. A lot of them died because of exposure, so cold, didn't have the right clothing, starvation, overwork, disease, exhaustion, all kinds of things that took their lives. Now you see here's a barbed wire. This is in Auschwitz also. You also see a insulator. What's that for? Yeah, the sharp part of the wire was not enough to keep people back. Electricity. Now, it's not like the common electric fence that you would have for cows. You know, you've probably gotten shocked on one of those. You touch it and it doesn't feel very good. This was a little worse than that. And this kept the people in. And people felt like conditions were so bad that they would rather commit suicide than starve to death or die or be poisoned or whatever. And so they would go to this fence and get a hold of it and shake till they would die. It was an electric fence, and you can see a picture here where a person is doing that for themselves. Yeah, over 6 million people, Polish people, died there. Well, this is Hamburg, Germany. This is where Mother was taking us for safety, to keep us safe. Remember, we're all little children. I was very, very little. And my father wasn't there to help. She made the trip by herself, just with us. Well, it looks like a pretty peaceful place, pretty good place to live, not bad at all. Apartment buildings and all that. And I don't know who we stayed with. Some family took us in, just like today you see a lot of people in Poland taking in refugees that are coming across the border from Ukraine. So somebody took us in, and we stayed with a family there. It was a single dwelling house. It had a basement. It was a nice house, not an apartment building. And that's where we stayed for the time being. Now, Hamburg was very important to Hitler, to Germany. The reason it was important because all the factories that they had, thousands of factories, and these factories were producing all kinds of war machinery. Airplanes were being built there, tanks were being built, ships were being built, as well as all the other ammunition and things like that. And also the railroad, this was kind of the railroad hub of Germany. And so the supplies were being shipped out from Hamburg to all the different places where war was going on. So the Allies knew that in order to cripple Hitler's ability to continue the war, Hamburg had to go. They had to destroy the factories, they had to destroy the railroad, they had to destroy all that was taking place there. And so the peaceful part of Germany ended very rapidly. The Allies, American as well as British airplanes, came flying over. Now in this picture I counted 27 planes. I don't know that you can see them that well. Well, they came through 69 times. They came flying over, mainly over Hamburg, dropping bombs. Now, a bomb, I don't know how much it weighs, but let's say it weighs a ton, 2,000 pounds. There were 900,000 two-ton bombs that were dropped during that particular time. 4,000 factories were destroyed. Now back then, you didn't have the precision ability to take a bomb and have it go particularly to one particular place. You just dropped them and you hope you hit something that was important to Hitler. And so, they did what's called carpet bombing, just dropping the bombs and hoping that they hit places that wouldn't. Consequently, a lot of people died in this as well. Of the homes, 250,000 homes were destroyed. Over, I think, was 90,000 people that died in this as well. But God kept us safe. We were in a house, and we were taught by Mother, when you hear the air raid siren, you run into the house. And so we as children would be playing outdoors, having fun, and all of a sudden, whoo, I can still hear what those sounded like. And we would all run into the house, we'd all go down to the basement, and we would pray for safety. When it was over, we'd come outside and we'd play again till the next, 69 times this happened while we were there. And while we were praying, we could feel the building shaking as the bombs hit. Right next to the house where we were, just like you see in this picture, the house next door was totally demolished. And I remember my brother and I playing on the rubble, climbing on top of it. I still remember finding a brand new bar of soap. very insignificant, but it's something that I remember. One funny thing that happened, there was a little carriage there, like horse and buggy carriage, and the dash was upholstery, and you know how upholstery would have these buttons in place. And while my brother and I were playing on that carriage, he took his finger and he touched one of those round buttons. And as it happened, just as he touched that button, the air raid siren went off. And I ran into the house, Mother, George did that. He made the siren, and now the airplanes are going to come drop bombs. But God kept us safe through all of this.
Amen.
Eventually, the newspaper here, as you can read in New York Times, the war in Europe had ended. This was 1945.
Throughout the world, throngs of people hailed the end of the war in Europe. It is 5 years and more since Hitler marched into Poland. Years full of suffering and death. Now the war against Germany is won. In a symbolic gesture, American troops destroy the Nazi Party emblem.
The refugees have gone through many, many hardships, different levels. Fear was one of the big things they lived, torture for some of them. There are a lot of needs, medical needs, as you can read here, malnutrition for so many people, diseases, illnesses, all kinds of things. And so much care was being needed. And we were put into a camp in Germany. This was actually we had been in two different camps, Ventorf and Eggenfelde, both places. And this is where I had my first 3 years of schooling in camp. And we were well taken care of in a sense. We were in these long barracks, which I'll show you a picture of in a moment here. But we had multiple families in there and divided by sheets. And we were given every day, to get you back up in health, a cup of milk and a spoonful of cod liver oil. And so we would all line up with our little tin cups waiting for our turn. And this was just for the children. They didn't give it to the adults. And you'd stand there, they'd pour the cod liver oil, put it in your mouth. You'd drink it, then wash it down with a little bit of milk. They used the same spoon for everybody, as I remember. I talked to Kay Kuzma because her husband, Jan, a lot of people say Jan, was there as well. And she said that's what he said too. They used the same spoon for everybody. But at least we had our own cup. So a lot of things had to take place. Now here you see a picture. The British, this was run by the British, by the way, the camp in Germany was an army camp that we were in. Outdoor, we didn't have running water or anything like that. But they even provided for us a little place where we could have a chapel and have our Sabbath services. You can see the little, it was a cloth thing that went over the pulpit. It says, Twoje słowo jest pravda. Thy word is truth. That's where my father preached. He had a number of converts while we were there. In that camp were a number of people that you know. In fact, 3 of us are here tonight. Elizabeth, right over there. Ella, back then, was Kutzner then. Lydia Kutzner, her mom, was there. And of course, I was there as well. If you look in this picture, Elizabeth is on the front row, sitting on the floor. And she's on your right. When you look to the right, clear there. Cute little girl, wasn't she? Now, these were the children, so you won't see her mom. Next to her, in the middle there, is George Kuzma. Did you know the physician? He was here in Milton Freewater for many years. He's moved away since then. In the second row, in the middle, that's me. My cousins are on my right. And one of the Kuzma girls, I don't know if it's Krisha or Danka, is sitting at the end on the right side. And Yannick is on the back row, and you'll see him clear on the left. That's Yannick. He went by Jan here, and some people think it's Jan, but it's Jan. And he was married. He married Kuzma. He married Kay. Next to him is my brother George. I don't know where my sister was. Maybe she was a little older, didn't get into the picture. But anyway, that was in our little chapel. We were able to have Sabbath services. That was provided for us. Well, I don't know if you can see the date here. 1946. This letter came from the General Conference. It was written to the U.S. Consulate, American Consulate. Because my father was employed by the Adventist Church while in Poland and continued to be so there in camp, the General Conference found a sponsor for us in America. Now, at that time, you couldn't just come to America just because you wanted to come to America. You had to have an assurance of a job so that you would not be a weight on the country. You wouldn't be a financial burden to the country. And so somebody had to guarantee, I think it was 2 or 3 years of work for you while you were getting established and pay for your transportation. And so Dr. Oliver in Rockwell, North Carolina, he had a couple farms, and so he sponsored us. And this was a letter that was written to the consulate at that particular time. And about 2 years later, almost 3 years later, we received a response. Now, at this particular time, what had happened is President Truman had signed a Displaced Persons Act allowing 200,000 people, refugees, people that were displaced by the war, to come to the United States. And as you can see, you might not be able to read that, but anyway, it says, "Welcome to the United States of America." It says, "By the act of Congress, you are among those selected." It's still very emotional. And here is a ship that we came on. This is SS Stewart. By the way, Dr. Oliver also for his other farm, I think probably about 2 years later. Did you come in 51? 49. So you came same year we did. Okay. Same doctor, Rockwell, North Carolina, and we had a little nicer place to go to than you did. You didn't have running water or electricity. I remember visiting out there. We had a little nicer place. But you can see here, this is a ship that we came on. You see the timeline here. 1939, the war started. War was over in 1946, I should say. 45 and 46, the GC sent a letter. In 1949, we received approval. In 1949, a few months later, we were on the way to America, 4.5 years after the war ended. So that's how much time we spent as refugees in the refugee camp. This is the ship manifest. If you look at the last 5 names on here, you'll see the Hintz family. My father, my mother, and then the 3 of us, all heading for Rockwell, North Carolina. On that ship, now, it's quite an experience coming on the ship. It was a 10-day journey, not like flying today where you get there the same day. And because of all the motion of a ship, today's ship, you go on a cruise ship, they're really pretty stable. This definitely was not. And we really had a severe storm halfway across. But anyway, to make things a little more pleasant, your beds were not fixed beds. They were hammocks. And you can see here, triple bunk, one above the other. And so as the ship would sway, the hammock stayed in relationship to the earth. It stayed still. The ship moved, but the hammock stayed still. So made it nice. But you still got seasick. And so attached to each hammock would be a little bag, and that was for your lunch. Yeah, the one you had eaten earlier. I'll tell you a little story here. I think we have enough time, but I was sick 9 of the 10 days that we were moving. Finally, the last day, I think I was okay. And I remember one particular time, you can feel it when it's going to come, right? And you don't want to do it on the floor. So I ran to the edge. I was on the upper deck. I ran to the edge, and right beneath me was somebody else doing the same thing. But I had enough control that I was able to move over, and nobody below me there. And so then I released it. However, because of the motion of the ship and all that, it all traveled that way and just plastered him, and I ran to Mother again. Mother was always a comfort. I should tell you one other thing on the ship here. I had never seen in my life a black person. I didn't know that some people were black. I thought everybody was white. When I got on the ship, before we even took off, there was a black porter. He was so black, and he was all dressed in white. And I just gazed at him, as I was just 9 years old at the time, and he in a friendly way took his hand and just patted me on the back of my neck. And I quickly ran to Mother. That's a person to go to. Mother, is my neck black? The man touched me. But anyway, this is our trip to the homeland. Now, Columbus Day used to always be on October 12th. Now they changed it so it's always on a Monday. So we arrived just like Columbus did on October 12th. Left on the 2nd, arrived on the 12th. And how fitting was that? And there we could see, because it was a holiday, we couldn't disembark. Not that day. So we stood in harbor there all day, just looking in awe, seeing Statue of Liberty there, seeing all the high scrapers and all that in New York City. And we were able to disembark the next day on the 13th. And as we did, we had to go through some physical checks again. And they put this white powder in your hair to kill the lice and things like that. And we were eventually off the ship and off of Ellis Island. So here you can see the checking. Well, that's me on my bike. That's the house we lived in. For the first time in my memory, lived in a real house with running water, electricity, even had a bathtub, and real toilet paper. What we always did before, I didn't know they had toilet paper. You take like newspaper and you soften it up. I don't know if you've ever done that, probably not. But anyway, we had toilet paper and stuff like that. We were on a farm. It was a dairy farm with cows and calves and chickens there. I loved feeding the calves. It was just, I have such wonderful memories of living there in Rockwell, North Carolina on a farm and taking care of things. My father was in charge, of course, but we took care of the calves. I taught them how to drink from a bucket. You know how to do that. They like to suck on your fingers, and you slowly lower your finger into the bucket, and pretty soon they're getting more than just your fingers, and eventually you slip your fingers out and they keep drinking. And so it was a wonderful time. Went to a school, a Christian school in Salisbury, North Carolina. And God was so good to us. I forgot to tell you, when we were in camp through the Red Cross, we were reunited with my father. He was brought in, and so our family was back together. And here's a picture of our entire family. My brother, you can see on the upper right. I'm next to him, shorter. He was older. My sister is sitting between my mother and my dad. After going to school in Salisbury, North Carolina, went to Washington, D.C. area, lived in Tacoma Park, went to Sligo School, then Tacoma Academy, then came out to Walla Walla College. And in 1962, I applied for citizenship. Can you see where I am in that picture?
Top right.
Yeah, top right, that's me. That's what I looked like back then, even had hair. So, I will forever be grateful to this wonderful country.
Amen.
That took us in when we had lost everything. And I'm grateful for the wonderful Christian education and the opportunity that I was able to get here. I value the freedoms that we have.
Amen.
And I know that we still, in this country, we still have problems, we still have pain, and we have sadness, and we have death, and we don't have freedom from everything, but we do have a promise that Jesus told us that where He is, we can be there also. And there will be no tears, there will be no wars, no sickness, no deaths. So let's all be there.
Amen.